I'll now hand the floor over to Mr. Safarov to address Article 14. For how many minutes? 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let me warmly welcome honored delegation members, Your Excellencies. Botswana economy is largely dependent on natural resources, primarily diamonds, which significantly contribute to the government revenue and exports. There are so many interesting events done, especially trainings, adoption special national action plans, development of the agricultural process and industry, especially in the sites. But at the same time, Botswana also faces challenges related to income inequality, unemployment, and the need to develop to private sector and infrastructure. However, climate change vulnerabilities continue to threaten rural livelihoods with droughts, especially in these last years. Limited access to land and financial resources, gender disparities in agriculture programs, weak integration of gender in rural development strategies, climate change vulnerabilities, limited gender response, fiscal policies, weak financial inclusion mechanisms. There are so many things done, especially during these last 5–10 years, especially with your government, for the development from economic side, but at the same time, mainly women working in agriculture side, and most territories are under agriculture. That's why I have several questions, especially to understand the real situation. How is the gender being integrated into climate adaptation policies for rural communities, considering the recent droughts and the impact on the women's livelihoods? How does Botswana plan to integrate gender-responsive approaches into its rural development strategies, including climate resilience, agriculture, innovation, and sustainable land use? In Botswana, rural women continue to face barriers to accessing land credits, technologies, and markets. Women are more involved in the production of small stock, particularly poultry and the crop sector. Also, in the last decade, Botswana has made significant progress in improving the conditions to rural women, particularly those who are engaged in agriculture. We have so many things which are done, but at the same time, rural women's livelihoods often depends on agriculture and natural resources, and particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and environment degradation. Data of the effect of climate change on agriculture productivity and women's livelihoods can be included, but what's about data especially including and how it's done? What about refugees and asylum-seeking persons, especially in your country, which are mainly coming from Somalia and DRC? What about asylum-seeking and refugee women and girls which are penalized for the irregular entry and stay in the country, and detention of asylum seekers, refugees in only used in last resort? We have so many recommendations from UNHCR, and one of them was to detention children, about the detention children and girls for the reasons related to the immigration status of their parents. I will say several points about the criminalization, but I will go on the different point. When the state party will withdraw its reservation on Article 17 of the 1951 Convention, which bars refugees and asylum seekers from obtaining work permits with disproportionate impacts of women and exacerbation risks of abuse and exploitation. And at the same time, we have some kind of misunderstanding or maybe problematic items when refugee camps where they are required to reside unless they obtain official permission to live for a specific period of time. Authorization may be sent back to the camp of detained or detained. There is some kind of information. You are ratifying the conventions. Afterwards, you have some kind of norms which are going against the conventional norms. Botswana has mainly 800 refugees and asylum seekers, and at the same time, we have so many concerns. I will not go about the details on the parts, but 1951 Convention asylum seekers should not be penalized with the irregular entry to state. Please clarify national legislation about the penalization of this case. At the same time, what about the girls which are detained alongside women detained, and which number of girls detained was described in the report of a commissioned law of UNHCR? Because the reasons of the boys and girls staying in the detention is different. I have questions which will be going directly to the situation about the indigenous people and the accessibility to the services, especially with the Busher people, and at the same time the different situation in your country. There were so many decisions, especially last decision 2022 and 2021 decision courts in using the lands by the women, especially from the indigenous. What's the accessibility to the services, especially education, health and communications? Botswana was urged to strengthen protections to indigenous people, safeguard their lands rights, prevent forced relocation, and ensure access to qualified education and public services. Please provide data on education programs, especially for the disabled women and girls, and data on women with disabilities in employment, if you have. Because I didn't find, especially last year's 2024, 2023. And I have the two more questions, especially which are very important for me, for understanding the real situation. How does the state part ensure equal accessibility of indigenous women, rural women, refugees, forced migrants, and asylum seekers, LGBTI women, and disabled women and girls to education, health and social services? You have so many positive changes, especially about the LGBTI woman, because you prepared the draft law. But what about the next generation? What you will be adopted in Parliament, or how you will prevent decriminalization? How you support the decriminalization process against between the relations of LGBTI women? And my last question at this moment, especially, how does the state party monitor the situation of women with disabilities and ensure gender desegregation and disability desegregation in all data collection activities? I want to thank all delegation members for the open and solid answers during the dialogue, which are waiting at this point. Kia leboka.